Do you enjoy the harvest of Missouri through food, fuel, or fiber? Interested in strengthening your community or making a difference in the lives of others? You're in the right place. This is Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. Join us for thoughtful conversations around the intersections of farmer, rancher, and consumer interests. Grab a seat, press play, and join the conversation.
I am thrilled that you've joined us again today for our listeners on Stand for Ag podcast with Missouri Farmers Care. And I am excited and have been awaiting this conversation with leaders from BioSTL. So this may seem to some of our rural listeners a diversion off the path that we've headed into St. Louis on our very rural conversations that we have here. But our Mo5 leadership team recently had the opportunity to spend a couple days in St. Louis with the team at BioSTL. And after that conversation, we were wowed. We were wowed by the resources, by the innovation ecosystem that they made sure we understood. And we just wanted to share what we could of that on the conversation today. So today we have joining us Vijay Chauhan with BioSTL and Matt Luetje. So Vijay, can you introduce yourself and your role and just a little bit about BioSTL?
Yeah, so my name is Vijay Chauhan. I lead an initiative called Global STL, which is an initiative within BioSTL. And the overall mission of BioSTL is to build an innovation economy that is globally connected and that is able to bring urban and rural communities as we build this innovation economy. First, we started in St. Louis, but we now see the potential for us to build an innovation economy for all of Missouri, because we believe for Missouri to be successful in the 21st century, it needs to be an innovation-based economy, and it has to be an inclusive one, not just an urban center like St. Louis having a vibrant innovation economy. We don't think that's going to be a winning formula. We need to have innovation be part of all our state, and that's what our mission at BioSTL has been.
Awesome. Matt, how about you? What's your role?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. And thank you for having us. It's a real honor to be on the podcast. This is Matt Luetje. I'm the Director of Ag and Food Tech Business Development at BioSTL. My role specifically is on Vijay's team with the Global STL team. And earlier this year, we recognized that there is just so much opportunity that we have not been able to tap into. So myself and a counterpart focused on healthcare were brought on to really expand, manpower and to tap into these great opportunities around introducing innovation across the state in healthcare and ag tech.
So with that, you can see, as we've talked through on this podcast, our goal of Mo5, which is adding value to Missouri commodities, the resources that we already do a fantastic job producing. So you just heard Vijay stress innovation, and you just heard Matt stress business development. So you can see why these are complementary paths that we are walking down. And all of us want to see enhanced business development come back to our communities, right? That offer jobs, opportunities, and economic development in our communities. And we're already fantastic innovators. So another element that is under BioSTL is we'll be having a conversation later this season on the podcast with Ejik and Quentin Rund. And he's taking that innovation that's either coming from the farms or needed on the farm level that just hasn't been mainstreamed, or there's problems that haven't been solved, and connecting producers and innovative solutions. And so that's another element of your team, right, Vijay?
Absolutely. And that is part of the Global STL initiative, where we said, in addition to our homegrown startups that we are building here, can we also become a magnet for top innovation from around the world that is coming to the United States and doesn't think about the Midwest as a place to land? All want to go to the East Coast and the West Coast because that's where they think everything is happening. And at Global STL, we said, let's make it our mission to build a magnet for cutting edge innovation to come to the Midwest, Missouri, St. Louis. And that initiative has been so successful, we'll talk a little bit about how we are doing that, that we ended up finding ourselves with a huge solution toolbox of innovations. And we asked ourselves, hey, many of these innovations are really appropriate for our producers, but the way it's going to show up to a producer is through some intermediary. And we said, why don't we just go directly to our producers and sit down and ask them, what is it that you're looking for? And how can we bring innovation on your terms to solve your problems with no intermediaries in the middle? And that's what EGIC was set out to do, to build a direct platform between innovators and producers on the producer's terms. Mm-hmm. And that has been a point of high resonance with our producers because they finally see somebody who's solely focused on their interest and their needs.
Mm-hmm. And there's such a, I have told Quentin in the past, I can think of so many innovative producers that would engage in that platform so well. So the tools will be offered in that future conversation. Stay tuned to Stand for Ag. But I can think of so many people that already know the problem front of mind and are willing to work to find the right solution or fine tune a solution for their farm and their issues because they've worked through it every day. Okay, we've touched very broadly on BioSTL and global STL. So walk us through a little bit how that's actually executed. Where's the rubber meet the road in your broad vision and your broad goals?
Right. So let's start off with a little bit on the platform that is building startups in St. Louis. So as you may know, Ashley, we are an innovation engine in agriculture, food, and healthcare in the state of Missouri. And when we started our journey 20 years ago, that innovation had no place to become a startup, receive capital, and build an innovation economy. And all that innovation was leaving our region, going to the East Coast and the West Coast, receiving the money from the venture capital community, having huge successes, and creating jobs and economic outcomes for people in the East Coast and the West Coast. And when you looked at some of the stories of where it all began, it was right here in our home. And so we realized we were just a farm system for other folks' economic successes. And we said, we can't continue with that. We're going to have to build our own innovation ecosystem, keep that innovations here, and capture the economic outcomes of that great innovation that our wonderful scientists and innovators and inventors are creating here in St. Louis and Missouri. So with that problem to solve, we launched BioSTL to build a complete, successful, globally connected innovation ecosystem for our homegrown innovation. So that's the first thing that we set out to do. Let me pause there and make sure I'm ready for a follow-up question from you.
Yes. Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add? Are you good? Or I can.
Well, it might be worth noting that we are a nonprofit. And so in the spirit of, why nonprofits exist, they exist to do mission work. And so we do really work on behalf of our constituents. So in this case, farmers and agriculture producers, and trying to find solutions that best meet their needs that they may not normally have access to. It just takes a little bit of effort from our side to bring those kind of things forward. So I would add that.
I know from a Missouri perspective, Vijay, exactly what you're saying. We are the show me state, right? We like those Midwest grown solutions to those Midwest opportunities. And so see the same value, not only with the economic activity, but keeping those solutions here at home to continue to feed our capacity to build on our resource base, not let alone bring in, when we walked through the doors of BioSTL, we got to visit with a Israeli-based innovator that wanted to be vested in the Midwestern United States, the breadbasket of the world. So tell us then how that's evolved over time as you continue to recruit and keep that talent and those jobs here in the Midwest.
Yeah, so Ashley, give me 2 minutes to first tell you a little bit more about the successes that we've had in building an innovation economy of homegrown startups. And then I'm going to come to you about how we are connecting with innovators from Israel and Ireland and Netherlands and so on. So this idea of creating St. Louis and Missouri innovation companies has been a 20-year journey. And in this time period, we now have worked with 400 ideas and startups, invested in 95 of these companies, and we put $36 million as direct investment as a nonprofit. So we showed up and said, we'll invest this money into your company, but we probably spent even more than that, or 2x that amount, in-kind services by making free laboratories, providing consulting resources, providing management teams, boards, helping raise capital. So a lot of services that we provided and got nothing in return. We simply gave it away. And so that $36 million was not enough and is not enough to bring these companies to market. So we knew we had to bring capital to our investment, otherwise we'll be wasting money. And so we worked very hard and got $1.9 billion of venture capital to come in and invest in these St. Louis, Missouri companies. So our 36 million attracted 1.9 billion. That was the fun fact I brought up at the top of our discussion here. And what is striking about that 1.9 billion, Ashley, is 85% of that was money from outside our region. It came from Boston, Silicon Valley venture capital, and international venture capital that ordinarily would say, where's St. Louis, why St. Louis, and would never invest. And we got 85% of the 1.9 billion to actually come into our region. So when we started our journey, people were stealing our companies. 20 years later, we are stealing their money and putting it back into our economy. How fun is that?
That is fun. That is a fact to celebrate, right? We have attracted 1.9 billion. So for those that, we have so many farmers and ranchers who do what they do so very well and don't get to come sit in some of these rooms. So the last time, we'll also be visiting with the St. Louis Agribusiness Club. The last time I went to a meeting, I sat down and I was surrounded, Vijay, by venture capital firms. It blew my mind, right? The level of interest that has successfully been attracted to St. Louis and St. Louis-based agriculture as a representative of the rest of the state. We just have processing and aggregation and many things that happen in St. Louis, but it is a full representation of the interest in Missouri agriculture and the state of Missouri. And so for those that don't get to see that, there is real interest in what we're doing every day to capitalize on our natural resources in this state.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to provide that one point of context that over this 20-year journey, we moved from people stealing our innovation to us now stealing their money and putting it back into our economy. And just another very interesting fun fact, you take that 1.9 billion. It took us 15 years to get the first billion.
Mm-hmm.
It took us 15 months to get our second billion.
Wow.
Right? So what you see is it takes a long time and a lot of patience. And this is why Matt was bringing up the point that as a nonprofit with funders who have a long-term vision, it takes that kind of long-term thinking for us to be lost in the wilderness for the first 10 years, starting to figure it out over the next 5, getting $1 billion and jumping and with joy saying, look what we accomplished. And then the hockey stick takes off. And in the next 15 months, the second billion comes, right? So this is kind of where we were. And the reason I bring that up is we are really now recognized as a national model for building an innovation economy in agriculture, food, and healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have that at the start of our journey. And so, for the first 10, 15 years, we knew that we needed to think about our rural communities, but we didn't have anything to offer. And we didn't want to be wasting people's time. We wanted to be humble. We wanted to show up and add value. So now that we've kind of done this, we feel like it's time for us to figure out how to bring this to the rest of our state in partnership and listening very carefully to what our rural communities say they need and what works for them, not pushing our model onto them. And so this is why the second part of the conversation we'll be talking about, which is how have we become a magnet for innovation from around the world now coming to St. Louis? How is that translating into these Israeli companies that you saw when you came? And we'll talk about that in the next part of our conversation.
Wonderful. So when our team visited BioSTL, we walked away with the same goal that you just vocalized, BJ. You just put into words, this needs to be replicated across our state. We have so much good going on, and we do have plant science, ag tech, centers of excellence in the St. Louis region that you've naturally built around, right? But there's other strengths in this state that we need to make sure we're leveraging as well. Animal health, animal sciences in other parts of the state is another core strength of Missouri agriculture. And so we share that same goal.
Yeah, absolutely, Ashley. So Matt, do you want to say anything to the discussion that we've been having here?
Well, yeah, just to complement what Ashley said around this collective host of strengths that we have in Missouri, part of what we're doing is to educate the rest of the international community in ag tech around what Missouri has. So in our day-to-day job of attracting business, we have lots of conversations. Actually, I was just on a call this morning with a group from Israel, and when they are familiar with St. Louis and from a plant science perspective. However, given a lot of the things that they're working on, they automatically orient towards the California, high value markets. And so what we do in those conversations is get them reoriented back to the Midwest and let them know that we do have, a very robust winery or grape production system. We do have high value crops, specialty crops. We do have a great beef production industry, swine, poultry. So we try to bring them back to more of a holistic view of what exists in the Midwest. And that way they can easily, translate the types of innovations that they're working on, and we can find a place for them here.
Absolutely. And so much expansion potential. Often when we're talking to prospective businesses, the cost of expansion in Missouri, let's talk about the dairy industry, right? The cost of expansion in Missouri compared to the cost in some of our higher priced states with abundant feed resources, labor resources, water resources compared to a New Mexico or a Carolina or a California, it applies the same across the board. There is so much room for growth here in that area that it makes Missouri a very attractive place if people know to look here. So thank you for the work that you're doing, making that case over and over again that Missouri is the place to be. So Vijay, before we move into our global big picture, now that we're those that we're stealing, give us a little bit of practicality on a couple success stories that first 15 years. What have been some ag tech innovation success stories that producers may or may not be aware of that really flesh out a little bit the work that you've been doing?
Great, Ashley. Great question. So one of the companies that came out of this is a company that we might all know now called Benson Hill. Mm-hmm. So Benson Hill is a company that is using AI and big data to go into the genome sequences of the various crops that we have, understand through big data what are the ways in which one can deliver a certain set of traits in the crop that is produced that is of higher and higher value to the food producers because of what consumers are saying they want. So consumers are saying, I want a product that is as less processed as possible. And so grow everything in the seed and simply deliver the benefits of high nutrition and not have a lot of processing going on, right? So that's one of the big movements that is going on out there. Benson Hill. Yeah,
Sorry. And so the example that I carried away from Benson Hill when we were able to tour was they're really mining that soybean genome, for instance, a real
exactly.
practical one in Missouri, and
Correct.
finding where in that soybean genome. So we're still raising, we're still a powerhouse in the soy production, but we're raising exactly what our food scientists need to meet those consumer demands.
Exactly. So it's the ability to connect what the consumer wants with what the food scientists now know they need to do to what the seed is now is designed to do through the use of these kinds of 21st century technologies. And the intersection of information technology and plant sciences is where Benson Hill sits. That company would not have made it to the market had it not been for BioSTL. So this is a company that started with two scientists out of the Danforth Center. Matt Crisp, who was the CEO from North Carolina, came. They were looking to raise money. Our team was the one that helped them with their first round of investment. As they were getting ready for their institutional round of investing, this is where big money, sophisticated money wants to come in. They were taking longer and they ran out of money. And so our organization basically funded their payroll 2 times, helped them get investors, and all of that, had it been a for-profit entity, we would have just written it off. Well, that's just what happens in venture capital. You lose some, you win some. But we decided, nope, this is something we want to protect. And so we continue to front them money to keep the lights on. And after that, they closed a big round of financing. Google Ventures' first investment in agriculture was in Benson Hill. It was a $60 million round. Google put half of that money up into it. And then the company went public with a $2 billion SPAC about a month and a half ago. That's an example of one company that came out. The second one that is actually coming to the market right now, Ashley, is really exciting. For the longest time, our farmers knew that a cover crop can be a really great way for building more nutrients back in the soil, for preserving the topsoil and the runoff that takes place. But it's a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of resources. So what if we could produce a revenue generating cover crop? So you're not only doing it to get the cover crop benefits, but when you harvest the crop, you can actually get paid for the products that are delivered. And what if we could grow that during the idle season, where after we harvest corn and before we plant soybeans, when land is idle, what if we could put in a third crop every 2 years? So that was the idea. And we have a company called CoverCress now that is coming to the market that is doing exactly that. So the oil has got a tremendous amount of relevance for the biodiesel market. And the meal is for animal protein, whether it's for cattle or poultry. The company came out of our work and what's happening now is, for people who are in the soy area, they get a little worried when they say, oh my God, we are creating competition for biodiesel. We just want you to know, biodiesel from soy is so big.
Yes.
This will be a rounding error and all of that, but it gives our producers another way to put some nutrition back in the soil, to take care of the resources and get paid for delivering a revenue generating cover crop. So it's not designed to replace, it's designed to complement and give more revenue sources and more options for producers.
This was a mind-blowing conversation that we got to have, and one that was so exciting to affirm that point. The Missouri Soybean Association and Missouri Soybean Merchandising Council now have a demonstration plot of CoverCress at their farm this fall and this winter. So they see the real potential in rounding out that oil market, but more importantly, providing that revenue generating stream that makes cover crops a win-win for everybody, right? We're all striving to enhance cover crops. And there have been some natural trade-offs with cover crops. And so this changes that equation. And we're excited to see how this comes to market.
Absolutely. So those are a couple examples of companies that come out of our work here.
Now, Vijay, blow up the picture. Take us more broadly. So tell us a little bit about global STL's successes and how you use that model to begin pulling in talent, resources, and businesses to Missouri.
Absolutely. So when we saw ourselves successfully building homegrown companies from homegrown innovation, we said, if you want to be a vibrant innovation economy, should we not also become a magnet for innovation that is already coming to the US but doesn't see us as a place to land? And so Global STL was set out to solve for that, how to create a vibrant innovation economy where we have homegrown innovation on one side sitting side by side with globally recruited innovation. And so we went to countries around the world, and the place we actually started was Israel. And the reason why we started with Israel is called Startup Nation. There are more startups per capita in Israel than in the United States. So, I mean, these guys are that productive. Second, Israel has solved for agriculture challenges. You know, it's a country that has just no water and no good soil. It's a desert.
Yes. Yes.
And yet you'll see some of the most productive agriculture in the world, a country like that. So there is more milk production per cow coming out of Israel than any other country in the world. There is more precision agriculture, the highest quality tomatoes, the highest production of tomatoes per acre in the world is out of Israel. Not from any of these other countries where they have tremendous land and resources. And so anyway, the strengths of Israel in agriculture and healthcare were really good in complementing with what we were good at. What we wanted to do was figure out what these companies need and bring them what they need. So what these companies need is they need access to markets. They need access to customers. And we said, where do we have big markets? And we knew, of course, that it was in agriculture, in food, and in healthcare. And we said, if we can bring the market to these innovators, make it easy for them to access the market, then they will want to pay attention to us. And so the hard part is we have big markets, but they are all over the place and they sit in their own silos, and it's very hard to bring them together. So Matt and I took on the big challenge of building the buying power of our region into a single magnet. So we went to, in the agriculture, we went to the big companies like Monsanto, Bayer, Nestle, Purina, Bunge, et cetera. And we said, fellas, you guys are big, but nobody knows that all of you are in a single place. And if we can put you in a single platform, we can get the attention of these international companies.
Yes.
As you heard Matt talk about, we spend a big amount of time selling Missouri and St. Louis to these international folks. And when they learn about who we are and what we have here, they all want to jump on a plane and come here. And so we said, okay, if we are going to bring you here, let's make sure we know which ones are the right ones to bring to our region. We just can't afford to have everybody come here and get disappointed. So we started by saying, let us sit down with our buying power partners. So we sat down with these big organizations and said, what is it that you need for your business to be successful that's going to really move the needle and make you jump out of your chair if I brought it to you? And we understood that. We called it the shopping list for innovation. So once we understood the shopping list, then we went shopping into the international markets and found those exact companies that are solving for the problems that people here say they want solved. And when we brought those folks here, the big organizations, innovation leaders were so excited that we got them exactly what they needed. And they started to spend time with these innovators in a way that the people in Boston and Silicon Valley cannot. So we tell people, if you want to go to Boston, Silicon Valley, you're a part of a transaction machine. You come to us, you're part of a relationship machine. Here we care about you. We are family oriented. We are relationship oriented. And they saw that. And they said, my God, you guys are the perfect place for us to build our business. What are we doing going to Boston and Silicon Valley? It's a total waste of our time. That's not where the markets are. And that's not where people who care about us live. And so we did that again and again and found tremendous success in Israel. Then we went to Ireland UK, Netherlands, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, in India. And so we are in 15 countries finding the best innovations. And having done that, then Ashley, we said, okay, we've got a huge solution toolbox of innovations, and many of them are headed to the farm. And yet we don't have the voice of the farmer at the table. Everybody's saying, I think this is what the farmer wants, and is bringing it to the farmer through their existing business. And we said, that's great. But what if we were to sit down with our farmers directly and ask them, tell us what you need? What's really going to move the needle on your farm? And we said, let's test this idea. And so we launched this project called EGIC as a natural extension of our work with these major corporations. And that project was about sitting down with growers and building a grower-centric innovation sourcing platform. And because we had already built up our brand with these innovators from around the world about us having a tremendous buying power in agriculture, food, and healthcare, our growers were very easy to bring onto the platform because the innovators were already here. They wanted to just get onto the farm directly, and they had no way to do that. And so we said, we will bring the farming community to the table if you can be a good steward of respectfully serving the producer, not taking advantage of them, not over-promising. As you know, a lot of producers are very skeptical with innovation because a lot of innovation is telling them a great story. And when you try it, it doesn't work. And the producer is holding the risk bag. Mm-hmm. And the innovator is telling a grand story about, oh yeah, this thing can give you 10 bushels of acre increase. And it's the best thing since sliced bread. And the farmer saying, that wasn't my experience.
Right.
So,
or that wasn't actually the solution to the problem I had.
Exactly.
That was a great pitch. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So
yeah, it's probably worth inserting, we're recording now in November. And when I think back to my days at Monsanto, we were in the commercial groups, we were actively working on sales at this time. So, the loyalty programs were wrapped up already. We've come to harvest, and now there's a lot of those sales reps driving down the driveway. Well, what's different and unique and special to the early adopter program is that we're having conversations also, but we're asking what the farmers need. We're asking what the producers need across all aspects of agriculture. So much like that shopping list that we have created for corporations, we've also created a shopping list for the farmers. And I know that in an upcoming episode, the person who leads that is Quentin, and he's going to talk about the early adopter program. But this time in particular, right now, we're having those conversations to understand what those needs really are.
I can see where it was a natural outgrowth. EGIC was a natural outgrowth of that pull that you'd had to bring those innovators here. It makes sense how those fit together. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about this innovation economy that you've helped spur and build in the Midwest and in St. Louis particularly. Before you jump off this conversation, BJ, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about BioSTL and partners just launched the Center for Rural Health Innovation. And there was just a symposium recently. And the conversations had about economic vitality in our rural areas, innovation in the healthcare space to create a healthcare model that really does work, that is patient-centric, consumer-centric. So tell us a little bit about the broad vision there. And another day in another episode, we may delve further into the intersection of healthcare, rural economies, and innovation.
Absolutely, Ashley. So just like we did this building the magnet around innovation for agriculture, we did a similar thing in healthcare. We brought all our healthcare organizations that were sitting in St. Louis in their own silos. We pulled them out of their silos, put them on a platform, built a big magnet, and brought top innovation from around the world. And then we said, a lot of this innovation is solving for problems that are really very rural centric. So as you know, Ashley, there are long distances between where people live and where they receive healthcare. And so the model of people coming to the care versus the care coming to the person makes absolutely no sense in a rural community. In an urban setting, you could say, okay, people live 5 and 10 miles, there's lots of transportation options. You could say, okay, you got to come to the care setting. But the idea that a person has to come to the care for a 15-minute visit or after a 2-hour back and forth drive and do this every week because they've got to have a physiotherapy or whatever the session is. That's just not consumer centric from a rural perspective.
No.
But we saw innovations that we were bringing that were absolutely bringing the care to the person. And so we said, wait a minute, why don't we sit down with our rural partners, listen and understand to what their issues and needs are, and then go out into the toolbox that we developed and say, which of these ideas can actually bring value into rural setting? So we started to have conversations with all our stakeholders. And of course, as you know, Ashley, health and economic vitality are two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
Yeah, and so as we have declining economic vitality in rural communities, we have declining health. As we have declining health, we have declining economic vitality, and it's a downward spiral.
Yes.
So we said the model of care is about bringing the care to the person on the person's terms. The care is not about just what is sick or wrong, but it's about whole person care. And it's not about just what happens when you are in front of your doctor, but when you are home and you're away from the doctor, what's going on with you? Who has a line of sight and who's there to take care of you when you are not there? So that model of healthcare is what we wanted to build. And as we were having these discussions, we began to realize that access to care is one issue we were talking about, but affordability is another big issue. Every year, every one of us sees 2-3 times inflation increase in our healthcare costs. Our insurance costs go up every year. And you look around and everything else is not growing that fast. But the one thing that is uncontrollable is healthcare spending. And so we found innovations that can dramatically reduce the cost of healthcare spending and create these zero deductible health insurance plans, which actually now reduces the barrier to care. So it's one thing to say my doctor is 2 minutes away, but if it's $100, $200 deductible that I have to pay for first before I can receive care, people are saying, I think I can just take a couple of Tylenols and I'll be okay. And the thing becomes bigger and bigger and people get sicker and sicker. So we realized that improving healthcare access and affordability through innovation was possible. But we also knew to solve for this, we needed to bring broadband into rural communities. And we know there's a lot of good work going on in that area, but there are innovative approaches for how broadband can be brought to rural communities. And then these technologies that we were bringing from around the world could ride on that broadband. So we see broadband as building a digitally connected innovation economy. And that then, these cool technologies that we are bringing, that technology is now going to be deployed by rural folks. So that means we're going to create digital economy jobs in rural communities, which means we want to tell the young people, you don't have to leave the farm and your rural community to go for these exciting high-tech jobs. These 21st century jobs are coming to you. And so that model is what we are trying to build with this Rural Center for Rural Health Innovation. And we kind of put out that idea out there through the Rural Health Symposium. We'll come back and talk a lot about that. But if I were to kind of quickly headline it, Garrett Hawkins is my hero for framing this. When I asked Garrett, what does health and economic vitality mean? He says, Vijay, it's very simple. It's about bringing the kids back home. And so we look at our true north in our work with rural communities on the Center for Rural Health Innovation is bringing the kids back home and bringing health to our seniors who are in these rural communities who are isolated, alone, and the folks who are taking care of them, their caregivers, are massively stressed trying to take care of them as they are also taking care of the kids. So that is what we're trying to do through innovation. and collaboration with rural communities.
You summed it up perfectly. It is not only making sure that our schools are full and that there's jobs for the generation of parents that have those kids in schools, but that we can also then provide 21st century healthcare at home for our parents that may be aging on or off the farm. So that is a broad vision, one that we share broadly through many of the initiatives that we do at Missouri Farmers Care. It is education, literacy, career awareness, and then the jobs to be able to bring that skilled workforce back into our communities, which just adds to economic vitality and feeds back into everything you've been talking about, Vijay. It is a broad goal, and I think that there is a lot of room for improvement, but we have a lot of opportunity here and a lot of good people pulling in the right direction with the right vision for health and economic vitality in our rural Missouri communities. Matt, as we've talked about all of this great work going on, Vijay's referenced several times that there can be silos, but that no progress really happens with us working alone, right? And so tell us, as BioSTL has built to this ag tech innovations ecosystem, what do your partnerships look like? Who do you guys work with that have come alongside as partners?
Sure, that it really is a simple yet fascinating matrix of relationships. And I'll just give you sort of a cast of characters that exist across any ecosystem, any tech hub or ecosystem that exists across the globe, by any sector. The typical players are: you have a solid university system that puts high importance on research, and in this case, it's our land grant based university in Columbia. And so you have the university system. You have obviously a corporate base. Typically, the role that the corporates play are to serve as large employers and really provide an economic backbone for the community. You have an investment community. So the VC firms, the capital firms that exist to stimulate new growth and new companies are critical to these infrastructures. You've got a character or a role that's devoted to workforce development. So if an area or an ecosystem does well in creating opportunities, you have to have that highly trained technical workforce to be able to run those jobs. So that's just a handful. You could also throw in research organizations, ones that are specifically dedicated to industry research and that complement what the universities are doing, but are separate. And then you have the groups that play in the interstitial spaces between all of these, the economic development partners, the folks who are really trying to help bring all this together, attract business, make sense of why it's beneficial to do business in a certain area. Where BioSTL really shines is that ability to convene and bring together these parties who are all interested in contributing in their respective roles, but may not opportunize the full synergy of what exists across the ecosystem. And so those relationships, just to make it a little bit more tangible for your listeners, BioSTL is very familiar with the Missouri Department of Ag value-added manufacturing initiative. So we've studied that framework backwards and forwards. So we understand what the pain points are for Missouri agriculture, and we're actively looking for solutions on how to address those pain points. Similarly, and complementary is the Kafner strategic plan. So University of Missouri's College of Agriculture had launched their strategic plan a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And again, we've studied that backwards and forwards. So we understand the vision of where the university wants to go and what they would like to develop. We feel like we can be an active participant in helping to bring all that together. And again, going back to that mission work or that spirit of the nonprofit. We're working on behalf of all of our partners to raise the tide, so to speak.
Yep. Yes, we share that spirit of the nonprofit, a rising tide raises all boats sort of goal here, and see that not only your platform work in convening, but just the oil that keeps all of those parts, making sure that they're meshing and working together. Vijay and Matt, it has been a fantastic conversation today, one that I believe may lead to more conversations down the road, and a partnership that we're thrilled to have with BioSTL. We appreciate you, the work you do. We think Missouri is blessed to have you working in our stead and in our state. So thank you for joining us, and thanks for your insights. We will link how people keep up with BioSTL, find out more, and get engaged in our show notes today. So thanks, you two.
Thank you for joining the Stand for Ag podcast with Missouri Farmers Care. We're excited to bring you new stories each week. We as agriculturalists have a lot of stories to tell. Stories of resilience, grit, and stories of families that are united by their passion for agriculture. Each week, tune in for a new episode and join the conversation.